guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Welcome, my friends, to the Modern Leadership Podcast. I am so excited to be with you today, and I have to be honest, this week has been super busy, super crazy. Do you ever have one of those weeks where the to-do list is an exercise in 1 step forward, 2 steps back? For everything you complete, 2 more get added to the list. We're all so busy, right? We're juggling so many responsibilities. It's easy to get overwhelmed. And because of that, I wanted to bring on an expert in Overwhelm, someone that can help me get it all under control, someone who co-wrote the book, Overwhelmed, How to Quiet the Chaos and Restore Your Sanity, and that is Kathi Lipp. Now, let me introduce Kathi. She is a national speaker and author of 17, and I didn't stutter there. That is the truth. 17 books, including Clutter Free, the Get Yourself Organized Project, and the Husband Project, which my wife's husband certainly is in need of a project. She is a frequent guest on radio and TV and has been named Focus on the Family Radio's Best of Broadcasts. She is the host of the popular podcast Clutter Free Academy with Kathi Lipp, and over the past 10 years has helped hundreds of people increase their platform through teaching and coaching at her Communicator Academy. She is a frequent teacher at writers' conferences and has helped countless authors and speakers find their voices. Kathi, it sounds like you got nothing going on. How are you today?
Just kicking back here with a margarita. I'm all good, Jay.
I am shocked, Kathi, that we have found 20 minutes, 25 minutes that you and I can sit down.
You know what? Let me just be very clear. I have an amazing team. So that's why I can get more done. And I also have the best partner in the whole world, my husband, Roger. So yes, I get a lot done, but I've got a lot of support. So let's just put that out there at the forefront.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because on the Modern Leadership Podcast, I dive a lot into achievers, elite achievement, and what it takes to go to the next level and get things done. And one of the things that the research has found is that elite achievers recognize the need of others. They recognize that they're not doing it themselves. And so by you saying that, it just confirms what we've already seen. And that is elite achievers get stuff done because of the teams that they surround themselves with. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I expect a lot of my team, but this bears out in our reviews and stuff. I give a lot to my team. I pour into them. So I love a good reciprocal relationship where we can build each other. And fortunately, of course, I hired a lot of people in the beginning who weren't that type of team member, but I've learned over the years how to recognize them, and it's really built our team.
Well, and this wasn't an area that I wanted to necessarily go into, but I'm intrigued by this now. And that is, how do you go down this path where you identify people on your team that are making the biggest contributions and those that should be on your team? How did you go through that journey in your own career?
Yeah, and I think this actually ties in perfectly with Overwhelm, because if you're trying to do everything yourself, you're going to live in that place of overwhelm where you can't get anything done. I think one of the things that we've come to understand, so we don't really have employees, we have contractors and we have interns and we have partners. And partners are people that I've seen in the world. I'm like, I like what you're doing and I think I've got something to add. Can we partner together? And their output is pretty evident to the world. It's the contractors and the interns who are a little bit, more of a hidden talent kind of thing. But what we've come to understand is if we can find people who have that entrepreneurial spirit, but are still willing to learn and understand the advantage of being a part of a team, that usually puts people right in that sweet spot to be great contributors, but also to get a lot out of what we're offering here. So we have interns. Once a year, we put out a call for interns, and we have specific roles that we need filled. Whether it's on the podcast, the blog, in publishing books, whatever it is, these are people who are desperate to learn what we're doing. And so they bring their best to that role. And contractors, what we've learned as well, if we can work with an entrepreneur who has their own business and they're willing to, partner with us in small projects, and we can see how they do on those small projects, then we can let them loose on longer term partnerships or bigger projects. And so really testing the waters with small things has been a great way to kind of feel out who would be a good fit for our team.
And, as you talk about this, one thing that kind of jumps out to me is this progression of employment. And before we started recording, when just you and I were talking about different cultures and people staying, working from home now, and whether that's going to continue and increase in the future, one of the things that jumps out to me is if you go back 50 years, we were really looking at employers. When people talk about old style leadership, IBM, right? You went to work for IBM, you were there for your whole career. As that started to transition a little bit, as we went through the 80s and the 90s, we started seeing commission come in or bonuses, right? Where some of your performance, some of your compensation was based on your performance. Well, now that we start getting into, the 2017s and moving forward, we start seeing this transition even further, and that becomes contractors and to a certain degree, interns as well. And that is you're proving your worth before you're employed. And then people are specifically finding what your value is, or what I like to call your unique zone of genius is, and what you can really offer. So I think that's an interesting thought.
Well, it's very interesting because I live with the rarest of birds in Silicon Valley. My husband has worked for HP for 35 years. I mean, you don't find anybody like that anymore. But, I think the reason he has been there and he's done really well is he has an entrepreneurial spirit within this big corporation. He's been able to create his own jobs. And those are the kind of people that we want to attract to our company. We don't want people who are just going to fill roles. We want people who are going to say, hey, I see you haven't tried this yet. Is that something that I could spend some time playing with and maybe develop, and we can see where it goes? And when I hear somebody bringing ideas like that to the table, they're proving their worth over and over and over again. And so it's not without its challenges, but I would say we have a pretty happy community of people who work together, who are working on their own stuff and working on our stuff as well. And one of my greatest joys in life is to see one of my contractors really creating their own business and kind of modeling it after what we've done here, or our intern who is now, publishing a book for the first time. This stuff just makes my soul soar. It makes me so happy. I can't even stand it.
And so when you're looking at people to join your team and people to work with you, are you reaching out to your community, people who are already part of your tribe?
You know what? I am, because what I do, I write prescriptive nonfiction. I'm a speaker. I need some people who kind of get what I'm already doing, because there's quite a learning curve and there's a language to what we do. So a lot of the people are, part of this community or want to be part of this community. But I will say, even the people who have, kind of swum in these waters for a little bit, or swam in these waters, swum is not even a word. But there is still a big learning curve. So when we have interns who come on all at the same time, we're able to kind of indoctrinate them at the same time with what we're talking about. But it has to be somebody who's already interested and passionate about what we do. Because if you're not, there are a million places you could be an intern, but we want to grow people who are already on this path.
And we already talked a little bit about this concept of zone of genius. And I want to share just a little bit deeper into that. The zone of genius is where the three circles intersect of something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate about, something that you're good at, and then a need out there. And so when you look at hiring or bringing on interns from within your tribe, you know that they already have that interest and passion. And then you look for that skill. You talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and the desire to keep learning. And that shows that they have the talent. And then, of course, you have the need. I mean, that's what the job is all about. And so you see that bringing somebody on in your tribe has this advantage of having people work within their zone of genius. And so for the listeners out there, as they're going about hiring and bringing on team members, one of the things to realize is that if you look within your area of influence, if you look within those that you know, people who already believe and care about what you're doing, then you've already met that first circle and you could bring them on and they'll fit in better. So I appreciate that discussion. I want to transition just briefly here. and talk about overwhelm itself and some of the causes of overwhelm. And I know in your book, you spend a lot of time talking about many different causes of overwhelm. I know I have my own. Everybody seems to have their own trigger, something that jumps out and causes that overwhelm. Can we talk about a few of these? I want to bring them up and then maybe dive into 4 of them with you. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Go for it.
So the first one would be this feeling that you have no options.
Isn't that the most overwhelming feeling in the whole world, that you are in a place with no options? And so we've all experienced this, whether it's in our business. I just went through a big, we'll just call it a failing in my business, where I felt like I didn't have options. But what I came to understand is that even when circumstances make you feel like you don't have options, you always have options about how you're going to respond. And so, am I going to respond honorably? Am I going to whine and complain? Am I going to, we all have options about how we respond. We may not always have options about our circumstances. And so seeing where you do have some power, some choices, can be very freeing. And if you're in a place where, you're just feeling really stuck and you can't see any of that, I would say get together with somebody that you trust and that cares about you to help you kind of peel back the layers and see what options you may have. Or, to break down, if the next step you have to take and there really isn't an option, well, then breaking that down into doable steps and asking people for support and accountability can really get you out from that place of overwhelm.
What a great idea, because when I saw this, I kept thinking to myself about this lack of options death spiral, because when we get it in our minds, we start heading down this path where we feel, there's no options. And even though there may be, we're blinded to it because of this spiral that we're in. So I love the idea. Get together with other people. And just remember, when you're working with other people, you want people that see the world differently than you. If you and the person you're talking to see the world the same way, one of you is irrelevant, unnecessary.
Yes. I think that is why my husband and I have such a strong partnership, because we are so incredibly different. But when we're both in that place of stuck, the other person can quietly and tenderly just peel back some layers and say, have you thought about it this way? Let me encourage you with this. It's amazing what a different perspective can do.
You want enough in common that you can relate, but not so much that it lacks interest, right?
Exactly.
Okay, number 2, causes of overwhelm that jumped out to me is trying to make the right decision when you lack information, resources, or authority.
So this is where I finally understood when my husband says, hey, can you give me 24 hours to think about it? He's not just putting me off. He actually wants more information. He wants more. And for me, I'm a gut person. I tend to go by my gut. And that usually gets me into a good place, but not always. And there are some decisions that should not be made with a gut, whether to buy a business, whether to hire somebody. You need to do the research. And so I think oftentimes asking for time and additional resources, we're afraid that people are going to think that we need too much information or we're indecisive. But I think really being thoughtful and considerate of everything that's in front of you and then asking for more is actually a brilliant way to go. And it's a skill that many of us, including myself, need to keep developing.
Now, for those of us on the other end of the spectrum here, those of us who are ready, aim people.
Yes.
How do we keep ourselves from getting into this loop where seeking too much information? On the opposite side, we have so much information now we're overwhelmed by it.
Right, absolutely. And I think that is usually just a fear of, like you said, pulling the trigger. And so giving yourself a hard date and telling other people about it. Like, I'm going to get all the information I need. I'm going to make the wisest decision I can with what I currently have available. And I'm going to make that decision by 5:00 today. And having people hold you accountable, giving yourself a deadline is going to help so much with that feeling of overwhelm, because what you have to do is start pulling back the things that really aren't going to contribute to the decision, that aren't pertinent, and just start relying a little bit more on your gut and the information you have in front of you. Because yeah, it is easy to get overwhelmed with too much information. And you have to know what kind of person you are. I'm the one who takes too little information. My husband is the one who takes too much. We need to be that counterbalance for each other.
And the point I want to bring out right now, as we're about halfway through this, is there's a theme developing here, and I want to make sure that the listeners are following along. So we asked you about how things are going, how you get things done, and you talked about your team. Then we started with cause number 1 of overwhelm. We talked about having no options, and your suggestion was talk to people, get some outside assistance, get some ideas. And we talked about number 2, having too little information, with the counter being having too much information. And your response again was have those around you, those support team, play a role. And I think the theme developing here is, look, we're all going to go through periods of overwhelm throughout our lives. It's important that we don't go through this alone, that we have a team, a support group that can be there to help us. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, isn't that the most overwhelming feeling in the world, to feel like you're in it all by yourself? And when you can be that support for somebody else, when they're in that place of overwhelm, and you can expect that from others, it's that big sigh of relief. And we need to get people around us. You're absolutely right. Every answer I'm going to give you is probably around team. And as you can see, I wrote this book with my teammate Sherry Gregory. When I talk about these situations, I'm always bringing up my teammate Roger, my husband. It's because we are better as a team. We just are. Everybody is better when they have people who are like them and who are just different enough than them to offer a different point of view, to help us really uncover what is at the root of this overwhelm and how do we deal with it.
Excellent. So let's go to number 3 then, and that is, it's overwhelming when you see day to day, you watch yourself working day in and day out, and you feel like you're not making progress. And Kathi, I have to tell you, and I imagine this is the same for you, but as an author, as a podcaster, as someone who's constantly producing content, you see all the work that goes into it, and the trickle of response is maybe not as fast some weeks or some days or some posts as you would hope or expect it to be. So how is that overwhelming? How do we combat that?
Well, I think that one thing is, we need to look for dips. Are there dips that are going on? I was looking at my podcast numbers in January. I was ready to throw a party. In February, I was ready to shut the whole thing down. And to realize, yes, the highs can be very high and the lows can be very low. But if you are consistently growing, that's the indication. If you're consistently growing, then do what you're doing. But if it is good to pause and say, hey, am I losing numbers? Is this constantly going down? And we don't understand, maybe there's been a one-time thing that has hurt our numbers. But if there's a pattern, then I think it is good to stop. And here I am, I'm going back to the team, huddle up and say, okay, what's going on? And here's what I've come to understand. My team members often understand data that I don't understand. They know, something else has gone on. There was a glitch with Libsyn or something like, whatever it is. They're the ones who can bring me the information that keep me, from jumping off the ledge. And so I do believe that if you are to not be a reactionary, you have to look at your overall numbers and your overall patterns. And if you're continuing to put out good content and your audience is growing, even if it's slowly, keep doing what you're doing. But if you do see those downward trends, then hit pause and regroup. It may be that your team is tired. They're not interested in what they're doing, or maybe you've lost interest. Maybe you're just out there punching a clock as an entrepreneur, and that's the last thing we want to be doing. So it's time to reevaluate. Whether you do that by yourself, I really suggest you do it with whoever you're working with and get some fresh ideas and get some fresh energy around that, because it's not going to automatically get better. There's no magical formula for it to just get better. So take that time to pause with your team.
And I really like what you said there about make sure that you're constantly moving forward. There's going to be dips, there's going to be valleys, but if your general trajectory is in a positive direction, and here on the Modern Leadership Podcast, we love the book Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Small daily objectives met that build up to long-term explosive growth. And I believe as I was reading through Overwhelm, that was in this section, one of the things that jumped out to me as one of the ways to get over overwhelm is to chunk it up a little bit, to recognize these small victories along the way.
Yes, I call them microsteps. And there are times when you're in overwhelm where you're frozen. And because everything seems too big. Have you ever been in that place, Jake, where like returning an email is just too much? I've been there. And so, one time I just had to say, okay, you know what, Kathi, you get atta-girl points for even opening up the email. You don't even have to read it right now. You just have to open it up. There are times when we get completely overwhelmed. Jake, I'll just tell you, in the past 10 weeks, we've lost my father's husband. My son had emergency surgery. Now, he's my 25-year-old baby boy, but he's still my kid.
Always will be.
Always will be. We launched a book. We launched a new product. And just a few days ago, I was making soup for an entire group of women who were coming over to my house, poured the soup on my hand, spent the day in the ER. This has been and that doesn't even count all the traveling we've done. There's been a 12-day business trip right in the middle of all that. Overwhelmed. And sometimes when you get back from, you've been living with this adrenaline for so long and you get back to real life. And I right now have 75 emails in my inbox. Now, to a lot of people, that doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm a zero inbox kind of girl. So that's killing me right now. And so I just have to take it one step at a time. I have to break it down. I have to celebrate the small victories. And here's the other part where I'm bringing other people in. I have to ask for grace. I have to say, hey, guys, I said I was going to get that to you on Wednesday. I can't type. So we're going to aim for Saturday. And I just need people to be okay with it. Get people to buy into where you are now so that you can breathe again. Because there are some people who have emergencies, but most of us don't. And we can ask for the time that we need.
And I think, especially as entrepreneurs, we spend our lives, our mentality, everything that's going on in our head is driving to that finish line. It's setting the goal, it's getting it done, and it's relying on ourselves. And we've come to rely on ourselves so much. And that's why it jumped out to me to make sure that I identified for the listeners the theme of this episode, because our natural default is to try to do it ourselves. But there are people out there that are willing to help us, that want to help us, that see our need. And because of what we've done for them, because we've given so much to them, they want to give back to us.
Jay, I could not agree with you more. I just talked about this big business failing I've had. And, we all have them. We all try something, we do something. And I can bring it down to one fatal flaw that I made from the beginning. I didn't ask for buy-in from the beginning from the key stakeholders. And once I could look back at that and I could see why I did it, I felt like I dug my own hole. I needed to get out of it. It was all this, self-flagellation. Once I figured that out, I'm like, I can try this again, but I get the buy-in earlier and I get people excited earlier. And I believe it can be a success. But what I needed to do was realize my own failings in that. And it was not asking for help. It was trying to do it all on my own. That's usually where I fail, is when I'm trying to do things by not bothering other people or not asking for their help. That's usually where the failure starts.
And I see getting the buy-in from your team, getting the buy-in from the stakeholders as really, really setting the foundation. And you can build a beautiful house. You can have the blueprints to build a beautiful house, but if it's not setting on that foundation, it doesn't matter how much love and attention you put into it. It doesn't matter how expensive of cabinets and furniture you put in there. The house is going to crumble without the foundation. Same with businesses. If we try to do it ourselves and build that house, we may have the best plans in the world, but without the foundation of buy-in from stakeholders, it's not going to stand. And so I really appreciate that. I want to shift now because I'm beating future Jake up right now because there's so many things that future Jake needs to do because current Jake's not going to do them. And I want to read a quote from the book, and then I want to have you talk about it a little bit. So we tell ourselves that although today we don't feel like taking the pet to the vet or filling out those forms or scheduling that root canal, our future self, that future Jake, will get right on it. We set ourselves up for overwhelming failure when we place unrealistic expectations on that future Jake, not the current Jake or the present day Jake.
Yes. And isn't it true? And so really the antidote to that is being kind to your future self. So how are we going to take care of that future Jake? Okay, today I don't want to take the dog to the vet. And now if your dog is suffering, take your dog to the vet. But if what I'm saying, if it's for a normal checkup and you're like, oh, I just don't feel like it today. Okay, so how are we going to be kind to future Jake? What we're going to do is we're going to schedule that appointment for a time when we know we can do it, and make sure that we have the support that we need. We had a cat that we had to wrestle into a cat carrier every single time. We had to put hawker gloves on to make sure that that cat got into the carrier. So it's saying, okay, we're going to make sure that we schedule this appointment, but I'm also going to ask for help. I'm going to ask my husband, my kid, whoever, to help me with that vet appointment. So I'm going to set myself up for success. I'm also going to do something today to take some pressure off. I've made that vet appointment for Thursday. Well, Thursday is normally when I drop off dry cleaning. I'm going to do that today so I don't have to worry about it on Thursday. I'm going to help my future self out. And so I have really gained a lot of compassion for my future self, because my future self wants to sit down with a book. My future self wants to go for a walk with my husband. So what can I do today that's going to make it easier for Kathi on Thursday? And when I started to think like that, it just brings such a sense of order to my life. And also I can do this for other people in my life. My daughter works for us 1 day a week, and her favorite day is when I've given her a list of everything that I need her to do. Her worst day is when I haven't taken the time to do that, and I hope she can just figure it out. So if I want to be kind to future Kimberly, then I need to be working on that list on Monday so I can give it to her on Thursday.
So Kathi, I have to tell you, I read a lot. I'm a voracious reader, especially with this podcast where I'm reviewing a lot of books. I probably average between 50 and 75 books a year. So I'm constantly with my nose in a book. And a lot of what I read, it comes across to me as, same stuff, different packaging, stuff I've heard. And a lot of the stuff, especially in the business books that I read, are timeless. I mean, I'm not suggesting that they're not valuable, but I'm suggesting that there are a lot of things that I've heard before. This Be Kind to Future Jake really struck me as novel. It came to me as something that I had never considered. It really impacted me big time, because I can't even tell you the number of times that I've expected future Jake to do something because current Jake was too busy or too overwhelmed or too lazy to do it. And all I've been doing is setting future Jake up for failure.
Yeah, and it's made me think about this in so many different ways. One of the biggest challenge I've had, I grew up without a lot of money. And so saving has always been a challenge for me. And because, saving's what you're supposed to do. Saving's the good thing to do. But when I finally saw it is I'm taking care of future Kathi and Roger, that's when it clicked for me. Like I'm saying, I'm giving future Kathi and Roger options that they wouldn't have otherwise. Because I like future Kathi and Roger. I kind of dig them. They're fun people. And I want them to have the life that they need to have. And so it's really changed my thinking because our society is all about the here and now and just live in the moment and get it done now. But there are times when we're just tired and we can't do everything right now, but we can set our future selves up for success. I'm so glad you found that meaningful.
Yeah, I really love that. It was probably the thing that stood out to me as the biggest lesson learned in the entire book of Overwhelm. And I hope that the listeners through this journey so far have gotten an idea of some things that they can apply to their own lives. Of course, the book has a number of other chapters, a number of other overwhelms, and a number of other ways to combat that overwhelm. We don't have time to talk about them. I don't want them to get overwhelmed on this podcast.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, I would love to just get to know you personally a little bit better by asking you a quick 6 questions. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Wonderful. So how about this? Current book on your bedside table or Kindle?
I am reading Hillbilly Elegy, a book about growing up in hillbilly country in the United States. It's a powerful memoir. It's really, really good.
Very interesting. How about a movie best ever made?
I'm going to sound like such a guy here, but Shawshank Redemption. It's my favorite movie of all time.
And Shawshank is one of those movies, and there's a handful of them, that no matter where you are or what you're doing, if you see it on, you sit down and watch it.
Absolutely, because you can dip into it at any point and you're going to see something powerful.
It's so funny. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were on a bus from Prague down to a place called Český Krumlov, which is like a 3-hour drive south of Prague. And the video on the bus was Shawshank. And of course, what do you think happened?
That's awesome.
How about a leadership superpower that you have?
I think it's changed over the years, but I would say belief in our objectives, belief in my teammates, belief in my partnerships, and just in the call that I feel like is on my life. So, because that belief can get us past a lot of things that don't feel like they're working.
I think it's a key vital step to success. You got to get your mind right and everything else can fall into place.
Exactly.
How about a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra?
Yeah, I'm going to give you one. And as I think Jake, I come from a Christian perspective, but I believe that this is something that so many of us could put in different contexts. It's by St. Catherine. And it says, be who God created you to be, and you'll set the world on fire. And so don't be a cheap copy of somebody else. Be who you were created to be. And that's what's going to change the world.
Well, and I love this symbolism of setting the world on fire.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's not just, be 1% better or be a little bit better. It's set the world on fire, just explosion. So I love it. How about if you could leave just one leadership trait to your kids or the next generation, what would it be?
It's going to sound so boring. Steadfastness. Just that they would be honorable in what they do, that they would show up, that when they felt called to do something on their lives, that they would follow that with passion and integrity, and that they would keep showing up for others and for themselves.
So important because, quite frankly, Kathi, I think it's lacking.
It really is.
I think it's a dying trait that needs to be revived. So I love it. How about this one? Most difficult question of all, best book ever written.
Okay, I don't even know how to answer that, but you know what keeps coming to my mind? I know it's not the best book ever written, but it's the one that I go back to when I just need encouragement and a little joy in my life. And I promise you'll never get this answer again with this question. It's called The Prize Winner of Defiance, Ohio, How My Mom Raised 10 Kids on 25 Words or Less. It's a memoir about a housewife in the 50s and 60s who wrote jingles for contests and kept her family afloat by the prize winnings. I mean, she won everything from Arthur Murray dance lessons to a T-bird. And I love this. Her name was Mrs. Ryan. The author is Terry Ryan, her daughter. And I go back to this book. I read it at least once a year. It just brings me such joy. And I just love her perseverance and her grit in some really trying circumstances. And so that's my answer.
Wonderful answer. I love the concept, the idea of grit and determination and finding success in it. I'm a sucker for any movies or, like the Rudy or the Underdog, the going after it and getting it done. And it sounds to me like that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, she was married to an alcoholic, 10 kids, and she, people kept saying, you should take in laundry. And it's like, she knew she was more talented than that. And so she did what she could with what she had where she was. And to me, that's a hero.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Kathi, I really appreciate the time that we've had today. Before I let you go, I want to give you just a minute to give us any last bit of advice that you have, and then share how we can get in touch with you or connect or pick up one of your 17 or all 17 of your books.
Well, I would say this. We've talked a lot about teams. And when you're looking for team members, look for people who are eager to contribute. There are lots of people who are eager to take from you, but what I've come to understand, those are short-term relationships. But the people who are eager to contribute and you feel that they're worthy of pouring into, those are the relationships you're going to have for a long, long time. We've been doing this business 11 years, and my longest contractor now has been 7 years. And we've got others who are right after that at 5 and 4 and 3. And for them and for us, it's become a second family. These are the people I hold dearest in my life, but they contribute hard and they receive hard. And that's been just tremendous. And you can connect with me at kathilipp.com. It's KATHILIPP.com.
And we're going to go ahead and link all of that up on the show notes page, including how they can get a copy of the book Overwhelm. Kathi, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and imparting some great wisdom on overcoming overwhelm, because it's something we all face.
Jake, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you again, Kathi. I am feeling much better now about that super to-do list that I have. Life is ever changing. We will all face those periods of overwhelm and struggle. Let's use some of the ideas that we discussed today and make sure that we keep moving forward. Some of my key takeaways from this episode sitting down with Kathi, the entrepreneurial spirit, that willingness to learn and have skin in the game. We had this, almost the entire conversation was about her team and about the benefit that working and bouncing things off and getting the team involved and how to overcome overwhelm through working with your team and keeping your team involved. And she started with that premise of you got to get the right people surrounding you. You got to get those people who can help you. And what does she look for? She looks for that entrepreneurial spirit. A lot else when it comes to our team and when it comes to our employees, a lot of everything else can be taught. But that entrepreneurial spirit, that go get it, that goal setting, that fire, that is something that they need to bring to the table. You can't teach that. You can't take someone who's not motivated and motivate them. You can take someone who's excited and motivated and teach them how to do job A, B, or C. And so that was one of my big key takeaways. Another key takeaway, we talked about the zone of genius, surrounding yourself with people that are working in their zone of genius. And that zone of genius includes where their talent, their interest, and your needs meet. I really loved that conversation we had about future Jake versus current and present day Jake. And being nice to that guy in the future. He's pretty cool. I like him. I want him to have a good experience. So stop pushing things down the road and screwing up his life. And finally, if you are enjoying this podcast, thank you. So glad to have you on board. The best way for you to spread the word about modern leadership is to share this with a friend. I am all over social media, so whichever channel you like, hit me up. I will see you over there. But until then, have a great day, make a great life, conquer overwhelm with your team, and stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.